So I called the guy over that I'd stolen the safe with, and I said, well, I found this gun, I found this other knickknack stuff, and then showed him the computer, and I said, and I found this, and I pointed at the images, and he's like, whoa, I don't want nothing to do with this. I'm like,
oh my gosh,
I don't want anything to do with it either. I didn't ask to have anything to do with it, but here we are. And I'm going to find a way to turn him in. He said, no. I don't want anything to do with this. And I said, if it ever comes back to me, I won't tell anybody who you are, but I'm going to turn these in. And he always will remain that guy.
Yeah.
Because to this day, I just kept my word. And I said, no one will ever know it was you.
Does he know who you are in his story? Has he ever reached out to you?
I got a letter from him when I was in prison.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I did get a letter from him when I was in prison.
Okay.
So I did what I said I was going to do. I took the digital memory card. I wrote some sort of note that said something along the lines of, I stole this from this house. I don't want anything to do with it, but please remove this animal from the streets. And I put that in a change purse and I put it in an envelope. On the envelope, I wrote, please deliver to Los Gatos, Monte Sereno Police Department. I said something along the lines of graphic images, don't look at them, something just in case somebody got curious, like you don't want to look at these pictures. And then I took it to a house. I did a little bit of scoping, someone that seemed like they'd be family people who would do something with it immediately. And I put it in their mailbox.
Oh, shit. Okay.
I put it in their mailbox. And it turns out that they never got it because it was the mail lady the next day who opened the mailbox, saw it, and she delivered it to the police department.
Okay. Whoa. So the mail lady did deliver it.
Yeah. The mail lady delivered it.
Do you know, just because I'm curious, you might not even know this part of the story, did she drive it? Like, did she hand deliver it to a police officer and get all like kind of freaked? I mean, she must have been a little freaked out. Do you know what that actual method of transportation was?
I don't.
It doesn't super matter. I'm just kind of curious. Okay.
No, I don't know how it got to the police department.
Okay.
Other than the fact that I know she didn't mail it. I didn't put stamps on it.
Right.
With an address. It was clearly I've given you evidence. Please take care of this. Is the nature of the writing I put on the envelope. So
okay.
I don't know exactly how it got there, other than the fact that it went directly from her to the police department, not like from her to a boss, to a this, to a that. I think it went directly from her to the police department. Maybe she called them and they came and got it from her.
Right. Okay.
Right there. Or she drove it over. I don't know how.
Okay. So what happened next for you? You had to have wondered if the guy was going to get arrested, right? So so nobody ever tried to because they could have fingerprinted it, right? But nobody ever comes looking for you for this, right?
Oh, well, I didn't allow there to be any fingerprinting on any of that.
Oh, okay. You thought of all that.
I thought of all that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So you were wearing gloves.
Yeah, I wore gloves even when I handled even though like fingerprint transfer and whatnot on an envelope would be pretty slim. I still wore gloves for the envelope for writing the note. I wrote it with I think I wrote it on a computer so that it didn't have handwriting, like the stuff that was in the note inside, all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
The anonymous note wasn't going to get traced back to me. The anonymous tip wasn't going to get traced back to me.
Okay. Because I've always wondered about that. I was like, well, maybe it was so long ago they were like less able to find people. Because I wonder that. I'm like, I wondered if they even tried to find who sent it or if they were just more focused on what happened. So you had to have wondered if they were going to find him, right? Did you start like checking the newspapers? Did you start, because we had internet, but it wasn't like what it is now, right? How did you start trying to figure out if they actually went after the guy?
I actually just went and looked at the newspaper stands every day. My family at the time, because I was selling all this stuff that was stolen on eBay, they thought that I was buying like storage units at auction or that I was buying stuff from garage sales. And so I told my mother, who lived in the same town, that this happened, to watch the newspaper because I had found something in one of my garage sale purchases that was questionable and that I had turned it into the police. And I asked her to just keep an eye out. And so she did keep an eye out. She saw an article in the local newspaper before I did. And she called me and said, hey, it says there was an anonymous tip and they arrested this person for child molestation or something like that. And so I knew he had gotten arrested a handful or so of days after I had turned those photos in. So they got from point A to point B as I wanted them to.
Okay.
And then I just kept rocking.
Yeah. And you just kept rocking and rolling.
Yeah. My life wasn't any different, right?
Right. Okay.
I was still addicted to getting high. I was still addicted to stealing. And so I just kept rocking. Must have been sometime in the beginning of April or end of March of 2005. One night I was pulled over pulling into my driveway. One of the local, the Los Gatos Monte Sereno Police Department pulled me over. It was the middle of the night. They had the lights on, the whole thing. I asked them, can you please at least just turn the lights on? Like, why are you pulling me over? They're like, oh, we just want to take a look at what you got here. I'm like, so you're not pulling me over for anything specific? They're like, no, we're just here just to talk. And I'm like, well, can you turn your lights off? Because the whole neighbor can see it. Like, no, we're not going to turn the lights off. And they wanted to search my truck. They wanted to search the pickup truck. They started asking me, like, where did you get that? And I'm like, you can't look at it. They're like, do you have any drugs? I'm like, of course, but they're in the house and you can't have them. If you want to see those, you're going to have to get a search warrant. I mean, I went through all this stuff with them. I was kind of snarky. I was pretty snarky with them. And one of them just looked at me and said, we're on to you. We're on to you. And then they left. And that was a moment for me. I thought I was going to have a panic attack right there. And so I started cleaning things up and actually called my wife, who I told you had moved out on me. And we had a conversation. I said, look, I'm getting ready to go to Oregon. My dad had moved to Oregon. I'm going to move to Oregon. I'm going to go find us a place. You want to start over up there? And she agreed, strangely. So I packed up my truck with a bunch of stuff. I went to Oregon.
Okay.
And rented a place and then came back to the Bay Area in order to pack up and never come back again. And that's when I was arrested.
Okay.
So
okay.
I went back to my place with the intention of packing things up over the course of the next couple of weeks. And I was pulling out of my house, driving to the grocery store because I needed an Odwalla carrot juice. And they pulled me over and they arrested me for 4 counts of possession of stolen property on April 8th of 2005.
Okay. Couple of comments. One, the Odwalla orange juice is such a Northern California, like, meth addict thing. Like, of course, we're like doing meth and stealing, but you're going to drink some orange juice. Like, that's hilarious.
Did I say orange juice? Did I say orange juice?
I mean,
okay,
carrot juice. Carrot juice.
Okay. Carrot juice.
That's what makes it different because it's carrot juice. Do you know what I mean? Like there's also like that Northern California, like, hippie side that's like, we should also, drink some greens while we're smoking our meth.
I was a meth head, but I liked carrot juice.
That's like hilarious to me. And then did you struggle at all with thinking, I don't turn this in? Did it cross your mind to not turn it in? Or it was just a matter of, how do I do this?
Yeah, there was a line that got crossed with that.
For sure. Okay. You did something different. You walked into the house to take it when you normally wouldn't have. Do you think that there was some sort of like karmic or spiritual pull that got you into the house to get it because the reason was bigger than you and it was to stop this guy?
That's a deep question right there.
I know.
I leave it in the same territory as the ninja.
Okay. You don't know. Okay.
I don't know. I'm not a God-fearing man. I don't tend to believe that the universe operates that way. So part of me is crazy things happen in the world.
Yes. Okay.
And I happen to be present for one of them.
Okay. All right. So you think it's chance you happen to do that.
At the same time, but I'll admit that it is, if I were to pick any moment in my life that would indicate the presence of being pushed in a direction for some higher purpose, this would be one of them.
That would be one of them.
Because if I had smoked another cigarette, if I hadn't smoked a cigarette, if I'd hit a stoplight, if I hadn't hit a stoplight, I could only have done this by walking through that property at that exact moment in time. It had to be the moment when he walked out of the house into the next house, whatever that 3 or 4 minute window. It had to be then. It had to be someone willing to go into the house and take the thing. It had to be someone willing to turn it in afterwards. I get that. Like, it is a wild, serendipitous, inexplicable moment. And I know a lot of people will say it was a God moment. And that may be true. That's not the worldview I adopt, but I'm okay with it being just a massive mystery. Yeah. I don't need an explanation for it because it is. And it's honestly, as we know, like, I wouldn't be sitting here today if that hadn't happened. Right. If it hadn't happened. Which we'll get to, of course. But
yeah, which we'll get to. So how did they catch you when they pulled you over in April? How had they caught you? Do you know? Was it prints or something you stole and sold?
Yeah, I had stolen, if I remember right, I don't even know if they make these anymore, but a radar detector. People used to put those things in their dashes to tell them when a cop was nearby. I had stolen one, I remember, from a Viper. I just remember the car. And I sold it to someone. And most people didn't at the time. I know we do this a lot today, but most people at the time didn't go onto the internet and enter serial numbers in to register.
Right.
It's just not what people did in 2005 very much. Mm-hmm. You might have a card in your house for something you bought that has the serial number, but you weren't really going online to register things that much. But I didn't take into account the fact that even if only 99% of people didn't do it, there was still going to be one.
Right.
And so I sold a radar detector on eBay. that someone bought, and that person went to do like a software update on it, and it had been come back stolen.
Oh shit. Okay. All right.
So it had come back stolen, and that led to the local police department getting a search warrant of my person, search warrant of my car, search warrant of my house. And so they pulled me over that night. What's interesting, if you want to get into weird legal stuff, is the fact that all those search warrants had expired when I got arrested. And so they picked me up.
Okay.
They were scrambling.
Oh shit.
When they arrested me, and then realized that they had been 10-day warrants or something. I didn't know this at the time. I only learned this later when I was in the county jail trying to file a motion to have all evidence against me thrown out, because we realized that they had acted upon an expired search warrant. So anyways, they arrested me thinking they had a search and an arrest warrant.
Okay.
And then because they were kind of scrambling, they found 4 things in my truck that they thought were stolen, and then charged me with possession of stolen property for those things. And in the meantime, they went to a judge and got new search warrants. So they kept me in a cell downtown long enough to get the new search warrants, and then booked me after the new search warrants had been signed.
Ah.
And in the meantime, that's when we had the off-the-record conversation with the cops that knew me, because I'd been on parole in that town before.
Okay. And the off-the-record conversation looks like this. So you tell them, how does this unfold?
Well, because I'd been on parole in that time, in that town, and because I was a good parolee, right? Like you recall, I came home, I was doing well, I was going to college, I had a good job, I got off parole. But the cops would come by my house when I was on parole and periodically just come in and search the bedroom, search the house, pull me over, search it, just to make sure I wasn't doing anything. It just so happened that whenever there'd be like a burglary in the neighborhood, they would also stop by my house just to see if I had any of the stuff that was stolen in the burglary, right? Because I was a convicted burglar, right? Yeah. But over time, they came to recognize, like, no, he got his act together. And so sometimes it was just routine. They'd come by like, yeah, we're coming by because we have to. How are you doing today? You know, it was amiable conversation. It was fine.
Yeah.
And one of those officers is the one that pulled me over and arrested me that night.
Okay.
And, you know, as he was putting me, or after he put me in the back of the cop car, he said something along the lines of, what happened? You were doing so good. Now what? You know, and I was immediately overcome with shame. And I knew this person. And I said something along the lines of, well, at least I gave you Aiken. It was something like that. Okay. You know, which is kind of like, you're a piece of crap, but at least I gave you Aiken.
Yeah.
It was essentially how I responded to that.
Okay.
I don't think I thought about it so much at that moment, but in hindsight, I'm thinking that probably set off like a very strange cascade of conversations amongst the police.
Right.
Like I said, rather than taken to the jail, I was taken to the substation, the small station locally, and then held in a holding cell there while we waited for detectives to come by. And essentially, I ended up having this conversation where they're like, this is off the record. We just want to know what was in the safe, how the safe got acquired. We just want to know. And so I didn't tell them that I stole the safe, but I told them that I definitely opened it, and I told them that I definitely turned the stuff in, and I told them what was in the safe.
Okay.
And they did keep that off the record. They didn't make that a part of public record.
Okay. What did you do with the gun that was in there?
I don't even remember what happened to it. I think I had given it to someone after the police had come by that night. A few weeks before I got arrested. I think I had given it to someone to get it out of the house because I didn't want to be a felon in possession of a firearm if they came over. I don't know what ended up happening to it, though.
Okay. All right. Okay. Just curious. So were they like, when you said I gave you Aiken, which is the guy's name that was on the flash drive, the guy, the predator, the whatever you want to call it. So were they like, did they seem shocked, or were any of them like, hey, dude, thanks? Or were they just very matter of fact, like, okay. I mean, was there any sort of emotional exchange here where they were like, hey, thanks for doing that?
No.
Okay.
There was nothing like that.
All right. Okay.
The only thing I remember is just saying, this is off the record, right? Okay. And I remember them saying, the sergeant said something along the lines of, yeah, we don't want to screw up this case. In hindsight, I don't really know why me saying that would have screwed up the case, or it not being off the record would screw up the case. I'm not entirely sure why, but
right.
No, there was no acknowledgement of what I did at that point.
Okay. All right.
So then I went to jail. I was booked in the county jail, and then I bailed out right away because I was only booked for 4 counts of possession of stolen property. And even though I knew I would face 3 strikes for each one of them, a 3rd strike for each one of them, it's not like in the system I look like I'm facing anything other than possession of stolen property.
Okay.
Right. So, because remember, strikes are something that come up later as they realize your record. It's not something that comes up right when you're booked in the county jail.
Okay.
So I bailed out. And if I remember right, it was $10,000 bail.
Okay.
I guess I would have made it $2,500 per count of possession of stolen property. Either way, it was a relatively easy bail to make. I got bailed out within like 8 or 10 hours or something like that. And during that time, they had done their search warrants, by the way. They had searched my house, taken everything. They had searched my car. They had impounded it. They'd done all that stuff.
Okay.
But then I had a choice to make. I didn't use meth again ever. After,
you didn't?
Never again after that arrest.
So that's like your sobriety date, April 3rd, 2000?
No,
Okay.
I didn't use meth.
Okay, all right, okay.
I didn't use meth.
Okay, all right.
And it was probably for good reason, because once I came home, the cops followed me everywhere I went. If I go to 7-Eleven, the cop would come in and just hang out at the Slurpee machine. And then I go to the grocery store and they just came park in the parking lot near me. They were just watching me everywhere.
Yeah.
But I drank and I smoked pot. I had a lot of fear around what was happening because I was going to have a court date. It was going to be on April 22nd. That was when I was going to go get arraigned. And I knew that if I went to that court date, I was going to jail. I mean, I knew it. And there's no way they would let me stay out of jail on $10,000 bail facing life in prison. And so I had an interesting conundrum. Now, I considered running. I had some money. It's so funny what felt like a lot of money back then as like an actual adult today.
Right.
It's like, imagine thinking that you're going to get far running the rest of your life on like $10,000 or something.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't go far at all. Like, for whatever reason, it felt like I could make a run for it.
We were actually, my husband and I were listening to your other episode last night on our way to a meeting. And you said that on the other podcast episode. And you were you were like, I mean, I thought about running, and my husband immediately was like, whew, what was he, 25? You're not getting far. He said something like that. And I was like, well, no, he doesn't run. Obviously, I'm interviewing him tomorrow. But he said the exact same thing. He was like, it's hard to run, Yeah,
it's not going to work.
No.
And at the same time, I was just exhausted.
Yeah.
I was just over it. I was tired of lying. I was tired of stealing. I was just tired of piling on the shame, because in the mornings, if you want to say waking up in the morning, because there were days I did wake up in the morning, right? And I wasn't high yet. There was just so much shame. I would say to myself, I can't do this anymore. And then I'd get high again. And I'd say, I can't do this anymore. And then I get high again. At that point, I was like very suicidal because my close friend had killed himself. And for the first time in my life, it had become an option.
Yeah.
I'd never been exposed to suicide prior to that. And once I saw that somebody had opted for something like that, I realized like, oh, if things get bad, I could do that. Like that's a possibility. And so I had a lot of that sort of thinking. And in many ways, drugs saved my life. In many ways, the criminal lifestyle saved my life, because once I got up and I got loaded and I went and did all that stuff the rest of the day, I didn't have to think about how I didn't want to do it anymore for that next stretch of 24, 36, or 72 hours. And then I'd wake up again, I'd feel that way again, and then drugs would save my life again. So I was tired of that, though. I was just tired. And so on the morning of April 22nd, part of me was toying with running still. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew what I had to do, but I was also scared to death to do it. So I know a lot of people don't think this is like, it's weird how people don't think smoking pot is getting high again, but high anymore. There's like kind of this attitude. I think they call it California sober. Yeah. Have you heard this term? Yeah, California sober is like smoking pot, but nothing else. I smoked pot that morning, and that's what gave me the courage to go to court. It's just what happened. I knew what I had to do, but I was scared to death to do it. So I got high one last time. And I went to court without a belt and without a wallet, and without keys and without jewelry, but with $300 in my pocket. And I went to the courtroom, and the district attorney, she said, Your Honor, Mr. Hahn is out on bail, $10,000 bail and 4 counts of possession of stolen property. He's a 3-strike candidate. He's currently facing 100 years to life, 25 years to life for each charge. And we think he is a significant flight risk. We recommend remand, right? Of course, I knew that's what was going to happen. So I just stuck my hands out. And bailiff, sheriff came over and put handcuffs on me and took me into the jury box. And that's where they do I don't know if you've ever done this before, but they do like a checklist. Like, what is your personal property that you have with you? I've
done it in holding, not ever from a courtroom though. Not ever from an arraignment, but from holding.
They did it in the courtroom there. And so he just went through the checklist. He's like, shirt, pants, shoes, and he's asking me about like the jewelry and the belt and the wallet and the keys. I'm like, yeah, I don't have any of that. Do you have anything? I'm like, yeah, $300 in cash. And he just looked up. I'll never forget. The sheriff looked up at me and he said, did you know that this was going to happen? I said, yeah, I did. He's like, why the fuck did you come here? I said, I just don't have it in me anymore. And so that is the last day I got high.
Wow. Holy shit. And I just want to emphasize, the next day. Okay. And so I just want to emphasize, guys, what we're talking about is at 25 years old, he voluntarily, and you had an apartment rented in Oregon. You could have gone. I guess you didn't have the truck anymore, but you had a place, right? And some cash.
No, I got the truck back.
Oh, you did? Okay. So there you
I
go.
got the truck back.
Fuck. So you said I'm signing up for what is probably 99% a life sentence at 25 years old. I'm going in. So obviously that isn't what ends up happening because here we sit. So remand, they take you to county jail, and then what starts to unfold? Also, did anybody go to your arraignment? Was your mom there? Was your wife there? Was anybody there?
I think my mom and my wife were there.
Okay. All right. I'm just curious. Okay.
And I do it, yeah, because I remember sitting in the jury box and then just looking over and telling them to go. I just told them to leave.
Okay.
They didn't need to sit around for the rest of this.
Right. Yeah. That's that moment gives me pause because I've had that moment with a boyfriend in the box, going, just leave, and you're like, all right. It's just so, I've been on both sides of that, but I remember that so clearly. Just like, it's like this combination look of like resignation, acceptance, sadness, all in one, like I can see it.
And I had something else to do now. There's something that I had to do, and it didn't involve them. There's something I was getting ready to have to do that didn't involve them. And it didn't mean like I wouldn't have contact with them or whatever, but like, I think I've said it in other places, it was the end of like one type of pain, but it was the beginning of a whole new type of pain.
Right.
It was the end of one type of suffering, but the beginning of a whole world of new suffering.
Yeah.
And I knew that. I knew what was getting ready to start. And like I said, I thought could very well be that was the rest of my life.
Right. Right. So then what unfolds from here? What's next?
Let's see, this is where how much detail do you want? Because I end up spending the next 7 years of my life in prison. And there's got to be a reason it's only 7 and not life, right? So I end up facing 16 charges instead of 4. So I end up facing 400 years of life.
Fuck.
By the time they figure out what they want to charge me with and what they want to take me to trial for, because they're not offering me any plea bargains. So you remember I was stealing from really wealthy people. And so the criminal justice system has a tendency to go hard after people who steal from the wealthy. And so there was no indication that I was going to be getting a plea bargain whatsoever. They wanted to take me to trial. My defense was essentially the same defense or same excuse I'd given family when I was out there, that I was buying property from garage sales. I was buying storage units at auction and selling that property on eBay. I didn't know it was stolen though. And I thought that the worst I would get going to trial would be an indication that I did know it was stolen and thus get convicted of possession of stolen property, and hope that nobody would want to give me a life sentence for that sort of crime. That's what I was hoping for, which was, I could get 10, 20 years for possession of stolen property, but they probably wouldn't give me life for that because some attitudes around 3 strikes were starting to change at that point.
Yeah, totally.
And so there's a lot of people facing 3 strikes when I was in the county jail for possession of PCP, possession of methamphetamine, because that's a felony, and they had the same sort of background as I did. So they were trying to give them 25 years to life for possession charges. And a lot of those folks ended up taking really long plea bargains, but they weren't giving, they started to not give the life sentence out for those lesser charges. So that's what I was hoping for. In the meantime, this other guy, the guy who'd been in the photographs with the child, he was progressing with his case, and he was facing, I think, 25 years to life.
You guys were in the same jail?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, yes, we were in the same jail, but not the same housing unit, right?
Well, right, because he would have been in protective custody and you would have been in general population. But you were in the same jail?
Of course.
Did he know it was you?
No, I think in the early part he wouldn't have, because everything I had said was off the record.
Oh, right.
So he wouldn't have known anything. But remember, like, this is a big jail. So
yeah.
Like the protective custody they have their own building. They're like somewhere else. And so I'm in my own building, the lockdown unit. And then I actually, incidentally, the strangest thing, for like 8 or 9 months when I was in the county jail, they misclassified me because they saw that I was originally only charged with possession of stolen property without thinking about how much time I was facing. They put me at the minimum facility.
Okay.
And so there I was facing the rest of my life in prison in a drug program in the county jail, staring at just a chain link fence.
Oh my gosh.
That was an interesting experience with a bunch of people who were doing like 60, 90, 120 days, acting like fools, right? Like driving me up the wall. Anyways, this other guy is still getting prosecuted for what's in the photos, right? And he is at some point filing a motion to have the evidence, the photographic evidence, thrown out. because it was stolen. We know it was stolen because he actually called the burglary in. Remember, I told you how he saw me steal the safe? He had actually
Yeah.
called the cops the next morning and said, somebody stole my safe.
Really?
He didn't tell him. Yeah, he told him there was a gun in it and stuff like that. He didn't tell him there were pictures of him sexually abusing a child, but he had called it in. And so everybody knew that this came from a burglary. The photos came from burglary. And so they were filing a motion suggesting that because the evidence came from the commission of a crime against the defendant, it shouldn't be admitted.
Okay.
Of course, implying that the police had something to do with it. So one day, the district attorney prosecuting him and my attorney show up in the county jail. They want to do an interview. And essentially, what the district attorney explains to me is that there is a possibility that the evidence could get thrown out. But if they can establish a chain of possession of the evidence that doesn't include the police, then the evidence is going to stand.
Oh, wow.
And she said, I know you're that guy, because even though they never made it a part of public record, everybody was talking to each other ever since I'd had that off the record conversation. And so she knew I was the guy. And so she asked me in this recorded interview, essentially, did I steal the safe? But prior to that, my attorney had told me, don't admit to stealing the safe.
Oh, wow.
Because if you admit to stealing the safe, then you can't go to trial, because then they have a recording of you admitting to stealing. Remember, I'd only been caught with possession of stolen property, but they were charging me with burglary. So I was hoping to be able to go to trial and say, hey, you can go ahead and charge me with possession of stolen property, but you never caught me stealing.
Right. Your whole defense was that I didn't steal. So for you to admit
that I didn't steal it,
it
so
ruins
to
your
admit on the
entire
stand,
defense. Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to defend myself. And so we did this interview, and she asked me kind of directly, did you steal the safe? I'm like, can we move on to the next question? And I did some sort of skirting around it. And then at some point she shut the recording off, the district attorney. She stopped recording. She said, look, here's the scenario. And she kind of laid it out in more detail, the case of how this evidence could get thrown out and what it would mean. And she said, I can't offer you a deal. This isn't an episode of Law and Order. If you're going to say anything, you just do it because you want to do it. I can't offer you leniency. It's not my job. I can't do that. And some part of me just realized the gravity of it, because it was some part of my mind was like, would I rather it be both of us free, or me in prison and him free? Or would I rather be both of us? Like, I was just like going through like all these things. And so she started recording again, and she asked the question in a different way. She said, did anybody ever possess the safe and the contents of the safe other than you between the moment it was stolen and the moment it made it to that postal worker? And I said, no, that was all me. And she said, will you be willing to testify to that in court? And I said, yes. And that was it. And I kind of get emotional and I think about it, because it's like I surrendered that day I went into court, that first day, right? But this felt bigger, because I really had to let go of the steering wheel at that point. My life was not going to be in my hands anymore. I had all of these designs on trying to control it and control the narrative and control what my defense was. And in many ways, I was still stuck in all the same lying that I'd been stuck in before I went to court, because I couldn't tell my family I'd been stealing. I couldn't tell the people I was in jail with that I'd been stealing. I had to keep the narrative for them. I had to keep up the bullshit. I had to keep up the lying for everybody. I couldn't tell my family, because then they'd get called as witnesses, right? And so there was something that happened when I was able to, like, on the record, basically say, yeah, I've been doing this, and then agree to be able to do it. That was liberating. It's a different type of surrender. So after I was on the record now as being willing to make that testimony, that district attorney went to the local newspaper. So even though she couldn't offer me a deal or anything like that, she did do this for me. She went to the local newspaper, talked to this guy who was a reporter there, and said, you need to go talk to this dude in the county jail, because my boss is trying to give me, more time than the dude whose photos I found, because I was facing 400 years to life and that dude was facing 25.
Wow.
So he came to the county jail. We did an interview. So it ended up being front page. Back when people actually got newspapers delivered to their driveway in the normal way, it was front page on a Sunday, and then it was front page again the following Sunday. And then there was just kind of like a cascading effect from there on out. AP Press or the Associated Press picks it up. My lawyer ends up on like the Glenn Beck show of all places.
Oh, shit.
Whatever his show was back in 2005.
He was on CNN back then. I remember. I actually know that.
CNN?
He was on CNN at that point, yeah.
Okay. One of the few times Glenn Beck said something I agree with. I think he says something along the lines of like Matt Hahn should be able to steal something every day for the rest of his life and do less time
I want
than
to
that guy.
find that clip. I'm going to find that clip. That's awesome.
Please do. I've been trying to find it for years. And the
Okay.
closest I found was transcript of it. That's the closest I
Okay.
ever found.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, there's like a cascade effect. And eventually the prosecutor in my case came to my lawyer and said, we'd like to do a plea bargain.
Whoa. Okay.
And so there was other media stuff happening. Like one thing that came up once in a local paper, there was an editorial run that was very pragmatic in its tone. It essentially said, if you don't give leniency to Matt Hahn, to me, what message are you sending to people who commit a crime and discover worse crimes?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I wasn't making this argument, but that's the argument that was out there. Like, would you
Yeah.
do you not want people who commit lesser crimes to, if they discover something absolutely heinous, to tell somebody about it? Of course you want that to happen. And so
Right.
I don't know if that swayed their opinion or if it was just the fact that so many people were squawking about it, but I ended up taking a plea bargain of 14 years, 4 months. And that was in the fall of 2006.
Okay. Did other guys in jail know what was going on?
Mm-hmm.
They did. Okay.
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of weird experiences around that too, because on one hand, there's people who came up to me, well, not just people, but there's also like correctional staff, right? So there's like all sorts of weird interactions happening. Like when my story first came out in the paper, I got pulled out of my cell in the middle of the night and taken to an interview with classification. They wanted to know if I wanted to go to protective custody.
Oh.
And I was like, why? They're like, well, because there's news articles about you cooperating with the police now. And I said, tough guy. Of course, I had a little fear about it, but I said, tough guy style. Yeah, if they got a problem with me, they can come see me. That's what I said to classification, because I ain't going to protective custody. And then I had some guys in the county jail saying to me, like, what are you going to do when you get upstate, bro? And they find out that you turned that evidence in. I'm like, I said the same thing. I'm like, they're going to have to come talk to me. And by talk to me, I meant like, I'm rolling the dice, because honestly, when you get to prison, nobody comes and talks to you about anything if something like that's going to go down.
Right.
But it was definitely a concern. It was a concern for me. But in the county jail, folks were all about it.
Okay.
Like people were like, I got all sorts of weird favors, like my sister flew in for like a visit. And then like, for whatever reason, one of the visiting booths broke down and she had flown in from Seattle to come see me. It was right before I was getting ready to go to prison. And she's like crying and everything like that. And she wasn't going to get to see me. But because it was my sister, someone in that visiting room said, you know what? You take my visit.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And then I find out later that there's like a Norteño in my dorm whose girlfriend gave my sister the visit that I'd had.
Oh,
right?
Wow. Okay.
He had lived in my dorm and his girlfriend knew who I was and knew therefore who my sister was somehow. And I ended up having to visit. So like there's weird, respectful stuff happening as a result. And then the weirdest thing ever of all was like when I got my name called to leave the county jail to get on the prison bus, I'm walking out and the whole dorm just stops what they're doing. And it's like a standing ovation. It was the strangest,
oh my
the whole
gosh.
pod, like it was the strangest thing, like stepping out and watching and having everybody just clap. And then I'm in like the center of like the pods where there's a giant glass wall. And I remember my friend BJ is in the window of the bathroom and he's just up there like looking through the window, and the rest of I could see everybody else standing. They're just still clapping and waving. It was the weirdest, most surreal thing.
Oh, wow.
Ever. Strange. And then when I got to prison, I tried to hide everything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which worked, right? Nobody ended up finding out, right? Which I know just because I heard you say this somewhere else.
I mean, I told some people.
Okay.
I told some people, but only people I chose to, because I had some weird worry that some knucklehead was going to book me over it.
Well, right. Because in prison politics, especially in California, shit's weird, man. And like they said to you that night, like I could see somebody misconstruing like cooperation is cooperation, but on the other hand, the whole philosophy around like chomos, right, as they say, is I can see people seeing like, this is a hero. This is a legitimate hero, right? This guy should be the rep for the whatever, you know what I mean? But you could also see like a few people misconstruing it, looking at it a different way. You just never know how someone in jail is going to act. You never know, is my experience.
Well, and that's the thing is like, and this
there's
is the
no
height of
logic
California's
sometimes.
prison. Yeah.
There's
this
no
is the height
logic.
of California's overcrowding too.
Yeah. You never know what someone's going to do.
2,000-3,000 people in a prison, and it only takes one knucklehead, and prisons have knuckleheads.
Yeah.
There's knuckleheads in there. And so like, it only takes one, or something as simple as like getting the two names confused if they read the article or something like that. Like, who knows? Like,
who knows?
Who knows what could happen? And so one of my survival strategies throughout prison was to just really, really not tell a lot about me or where I came from or about my personal story. I had to be present because the politics require that you're present. You can't really just drop out. But I definitely I built up a pretty strong sense of anxiety and fear around vulnerability, around being open and honest with people, about telling my story, such that it's like I carry that to my time home. And it took me a number of years, including therapy and stuff, to work through my fear of vulnerability, my fear of exposing myself to people, because it was a survival strategy that worked
Yeah,
for
totally.
prison, but it wasn't useful when I came home.
Right. Well, and I learned too, I don't know if you ever experienced this, you just don't want to say a lot, because I also learned that you don't even want anybody to know what your intellect looks like, what your vocabulary, you know what I mean? Like there's just a lot that you don't want to expose. You know, it's better to stay quiet and not say a lot, which I learned the hard way, you know, and eventually you just don't say much. You know, that was kind of what I learned as well. So you pled to 14 years and went to, you know, the whole, obviously you go to the place before they send you, like processing. What's the first one? Reception. Yes. You go to reception. And then, you know, California prison systems, they're moving you around, right? Place to place to place. And were you scared when you first went?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's prison.
It's prison,
It's
right?
prison. And I had to, this is going to be a different time than I'd done before, right? I was at basically medium security in my first prison term, and this was going to be different. You know, politics were going to be different. Consequences for screwing up were more severe. You know, people got killed on the yards I was at, and over stuff that we would never even really bother to think too much about out here. You know, and so yeah, of course I was scared, but I think that you have to have that.
You have to,
right?
Yeah,
you have to have that.
Well, and learn the lingo and learn the politics and learn how it all works. And my experience was once I understood that stuff, then you can do what you have to do to survive and, you know, keep your head down.
Yeah. And figure out a way to, I'd already decided when I was in the county jail that I wanted to make this my last time doing this. I decided that prison was going to be transformative for me. And I decided that fairly early on, before I took a plea bargain, before any of that this was my life. You know, I think maybe you heard it somewhere else, but I had a lawyer who was kind of a father figure for me. He had been my lawyer for my first case, and early on in my second case, he came to visit me and he said, "Matt, I'm not going to be able to save you from this one." You know, he didn't say, you're going to get a life sentence. He says, "I'm going to do everything I can to keep you from doing life in prison, but you're not going home soon." You know? And so what he said was something along the lines of this is your home now. And you might be here a decade or 2 decades, but this is your home now. And you don't get to think of this as just some blip on the radar. How you come out at the end of these 10 or 20 years, whatever it is dependent upon what you do right now and the choices you make now. And that's entirely up to you. But it starts with recognizing that this is your life. And he died 2 weeks later. He died of a heart attack 2 weeks later. And so they stuck in my mind as the final words of somebody. And so there's something that just really resonated with me for the rest of my prison term, this idea that some people go do time and they try to kill it, right? They're trying to pass the time. They're sleeping, they're getting high, they're watching TV, they're doing whatever. And it just struck me that every moment that I try to kill is actually just killing myself. Because no matter where I am, whether I'm in prison or I'm out here, this is my life. This is all I've got. And so I tried to make the most of my time in prison, despite where I was. 7 years would be an enormous amount of stretch of my life to just try to kill.
Yeah, right. So
at the time it was going to be 9, but I ended up finding a way to make it earlier. But that's a long time.
Yeah.
To just figure out a way to put a gap in your resume of life. You don't want that.
Totally.
What can you do to make the most of that? And so I kind of set out to do that.
I've never heard anybody put it that way, but you're so right. It's your life. No matter where it's playing out, it is your life. And what do you want to do with those moments and the time that you have? What did you do? How did you make that a transformative time? How did you spend your time?
Well, like I said, it started in the county jail. So, I started working the 12 steps. So 2 things happened simultaneously. I decided I was suffering enough to do something about it.
Okay.
Right. Remember I had said,
I
had been in that college course, and there was the Buddhism stuff, and I filed it away as when I'm suffering, this is a good thing to try out. And so I did 2 things. I started digging into Buddhism and meditation on one hand, and then I also asked my soon-to-be ex-wife whether she would find me someone willing to sponsor me in the 12 steps.
Okay.
My thinking with working the 12 steps was simply that things can't get any worse than they are currently. So the worst thing that could happen is not a damn thing, right? That's the only reason I did the 12 steps. It's like nothing could get worse. So let's just roll the dice and hope that they get better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started working the steps with a sponsor through the mail, through someone who I met then. I didn't know this person from before, but through the mail, through like phone calls and through visits. I started working the steps with him, and I did my 4-step in visiting in the county jail. And that 4-step came because I had a lot of shame. I had a lot of regret. I had a lot of like, is this the end of my life sort of thinking? And I would lay in my cell at night with the red light that was on in the cell and stare at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep, and I just had so many cycling thoughts. And at some point, my sponsor told me, he's like, have you considered writing down all the bullshit that's keeping you awake at night? And that's basically what I did. So I started writing down the nonsense that was keeping me awake at night. And one day I just had enough that I thought I had an inventory. I had it out. You're not allowed to bring anything with you into visiting. So I took my 4-step and I crumpled it up into a ball and I shoved it in my underwear next to my junk. And because they'll never touch that thing when they do the pat down, right? So I went into visiting with underwear full of 4th-step, and then I did my 4-step. But the thing is there's still the phone call things, And so I did most of the phone call, but then the other stuff I just held up to the glass.
Oh, right. Because they're listening to you.
Yeah, the recorded call. So like so my 4-step was monitored.
Okay.
But the stuff relating to my case and everything like that, I just held it up to the glass.
Okay. And did the guy get up and read it?
My sponsor, he just read it through the glass.
Okay.
The parts that I didn't want to say over the recording. And strangely, there's a lot of things that coincided when that happened, because I also stopped having those sleepless nights. I stopped having those sleepless nights like that after I did that 5th step. But I also got my plea bargain, the notion that I was going to get a plea bargain all around the same time. So sometimes I say like, my sleepless nights, like that burden was lifted when I did my 5th step, but I also got the plea bargain offer around the same time. But anyways, it all happened around the same time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I started doing 12-step work there. I think I actually started sponsoring a guy there in the county jail. I started a meeting in the county jail.
Oh, wow.
And then I went on to prison, and then all sorts of 12-step available when I got to Folsom State Prison. Lots of meetings. I started to meet lots of people. I also found meditation groups. So I was able to start meditating in a Buddhist group. I started meditating with like a Catholic centering prayer group. I started doing yoga. That's where I met really like serious sponsees.
Okay.
Like in the county jail, I had like I'm kind of interested, bro, but
right.
But then in prison, there was people who are like, you're the first person I've met who's gone through all 12 steps, and I want to work 12 steps, and I want to do all of it. And so that's where I actually started having like what I would think of as like serious sponsorship or serious sponsees. And
what was your experience with the 12 steps like after going through them? Because I'm a big fan of the 12 steps. My audience knows that. I think it's free, individualized therapy that's available. And when worked with a sponsor, it's such a positive experience. Was that your experience, or what is your feeling around it?
I'm not sure you are aware, but I got sober in 12-step. I don't actually do 12-step anymore. And it's not because I have like a resentment or anything against 12-step. For me, like I did 12-step because it's what was available, and I was desperate enough to make it work, right? I was desperate enough to make it work. And so when I got to the parts about turning my will and my life over to the care of God as we understand him, I just ignored it.
Okay.
In the sense of like, I did the step. My sponsor asked me to get on my knees and do a prayer and stuff like that. So I did it.
Okay.
And I didn't believe in God.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, like, I did know that, which is why I wanted to ask. I did know that you didn't do it anymore, but I had a feeling that you would still look back and say, you're glad you did it. You would do it again if you went back in time, right?
Oh, and I think there's invaluable stuff that's in 12 steps that some other programs need to pick up. But I just interpreted it through the lens that made sense to me. And so when I saw, like, as we understood him, like, that didn't include God in any sense whatsoever, period. That's just when something like higher power didn't include anything like God, right? When I would do stuff like 6, 7 step where you're asking for shortcomings to be removed, like, I did those completely differently. Now my sponsor worked them with me in kind of like the traditional, almost fast track, because as we know in the AA book, there's one paragraph for 6 and one paragraph for 7, right? But when I started working those steps with other people, I did them like kind of like a therapy session, like I started extracted patterns of behavior and patterns of thought and patterns of defects that we had found, defects of character or shortcomings that we had found through the process of reading a fourth step. And then we generated lists of the way that those character faults or whatever exemplified themselves. And then we worked on them individually. Or I had people keep journals throughout the day, like whenever they felt restless, irritable, discontent, or whenever any of these things happened, to write down which character fault might be arising at the time. And then we'd look at those. So like I found ways of like actually working with those things rather than just like hoping they go away, which is kind of one of my criticisms with the way that they are structured and the way that they're written in the steps. But all that said, the 12 steps like worked wonders for me. I just interpreted them in a Buddhist light, and a meditative light, and a non-God dependent light. And that's how I did it.
But see, I love that. That's one of the reasons, again, why I wanted you to come on, because from watching your social media, I did know that. And so I think it's important to say that you can work them without some faith-based belief in God, which is often what people think. But you can work them, like you just said, through the lens of meditation, Buddhism. So, because you obviously felt some sort of connection outside of yourself, and that's why meditation worked for you, right? I mean, some sort of Zen feeling. How would you describe it?
I think at the time, like I was pretty heavy into the idea. Now we've heard this stuff. It's become more popular today. The idea that opposite of addiction is connection and stuff like that. I'm sure you've heard that. I was actually just pretty solidly in the school that the actual power that existed in any particular 12-step program was the group itself, was the fact that you had other people to share the experience with. And I still feel that way. Like in Buddhism, we take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the Sangha is the community of people on the path with you that push you along the way. And so like one of the refuges, the places we find safety, is in community. I still believe that is one of the biggest power, the highest power that we find in a 12-step group. And I know there's people who are in 12 steps who will disagree with me, and that's fine. But so like that's kind of how I interpret it back then, in terms of like, what is the higher power? What is the biggest thing that's not me? And to me, that's the group. And in so many ways, that's why the Buddhist path and the 12-step stuff coincide so much. Because in Buddhism, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but the central problem, the central issue is self. It is identity. It is clinging to self and notions of self. And so this idea that self is at the center of all suffering in Buddhism aligns well with the selfish, self-centered, and the stuff we talk about so often in 12-step programs. Now, of course, there are philosophical differences about what's happening with self there, and we don't need to get into that here. But the point is, I could find alignments.
Sure.
I could find alignments. And so when I got to prayer and meditation, like in the 11th step, I leaned more heavily into the meditation side. Whereas, as we know, a lot of people will lean heavily into the prayer side and ignore the meditation part. Right. So I just did the reverse of what everybody else was doing. So I thought that was fine too.
Well, it worked for you. So did you do the Buddhist, what is it? Nom Reikyo. What's the phrase? Nom Reikyo, the main Buddhist
That's a different
mantra.
school of Buddhism. That's
it is.
School, but yeah, so many different schools. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. But you know what I mean.
I think so, but I can't remember it because it's not my practice. So I don't know.
Nom Reikyo or something like that. I know it. Okay. I used to actually, I had learned it. I saw the Tina Turner movie and she's doing it. And I was in LA doing a bunch of coke at the time when I watched that movie. And I was desperately trying to stop doing cocaine and couldn't. And I'd be high doing that Buddhist thing, trying to help myself sleep from coke, just trying to like do a Buddhist meditation high on cocaine. Like, please help me stop doing cocaine, like while I was loaded. And so I'm surprised I don't still remember that phrase actually, because I
How'd
said
that work out for you?
Poorly, very poorly. Well, that was in 2008 and I don't get clean till 2015. So not well. But I did memorize it because I saw Tina Turner doing it. And I was like, well, worked for her, Anyways, so, but I do want to ask you a little bit more because I find I don't know anything about Buddhism, obviously, because I didn't know there's multiple schools, but I find it very, very interesting. And I think it's very, very cool, like the little bit that I have learned. So we don't have to go super in depth in this because I know that there's a lot to it. But what you just said is really interesting to me. So the main issue is the self. And then you said there are the three aspects that are the solution, for lack of a better word. One of them is community. What were the other two?
So it's Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So Buddha refers to like both the historical person who brought the teachings, for lack of a
Okay.
better way of putting it, as well as the fact that we too can become Buddha-like in the sense that we can find awakening. Now, if you think about the Buddhist teachings, they essentially say there is suffering in life. Suffering is a direct result of craving, right? That's the first two teachings, is that there is suffering in life and we suffer because we crave. And craving comes in so many different forms, right? It can come for craving for things, for people. It comes often as a craving for something to be permanent. So we experience a state that we like, and then we want that state to continue. We crave its continuance, or we are experiencing a state that we don't like. There's a loud noise in the room. There's people we don't like that are around us, so we crave for them to go away. These are all forms of craving. And so essentially the teaching is that we spend our entire lives, and this is why it works so well with addiction, is we spend our entire lives chasing pleasure and pushing away pain. And that we suffer as a direct result of having craving for and expectation for more pleasure and less pain. And then we spend our whole lives strategizing ways to increase one and not the other. That is the fundamental teaching of the Buddha, is we experience suffering and it's a direct result of craving. What then follows is like, there are ways to eliminate the craving. Ending the craving is possible, which means ending the suffering is possible. And then the fourth noble truth is the fourth part of the teaching, which is here's how. And then he gives you like a whole path for it. So when we talk about taking these three refuges in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, what we're really talking about is taking refuge in the fact that awakening is possible. He did it. Other people have done it. We can do it. We can end the suffering caused by craving. Taking refuge in the Dharma, which is the other word for his teachings. So essentially, there's a person who's done it before. There's a path to do it. And then the third is the Sangha, or the community, which is the group of people we're doing it with. So we're essentially finding safety in the fact that there's been an example, there's a way to do it, it's been laid out for us, and there's people to do it with. That's kind of like what I meant by those three refuges.
Okay.
And in many ways, the program I work now, which is Recovery Dharma, is structured around those three refuges.
Okay. So that's what I want to talk about. So you're in prison, you end up you volunteer for fire camp, which gets you out sooner, right? Basically. And I know there's obviously a lot here, but a lot of my audience has been incarcerated, this kind of stuff that, we all kind of know. He got 14 years, went to fire camp in California, got out a little earlier. You don't use while you're in there, right? And you start studying these various, like you said, using your time to get better, right? This is going to be the last time that you're there. So when you parole, where do you go?
I come back to the Bay Area, San Jose. I parole to a friend's house.
What year was that?
2012.
Okay. All right.
It's 2012. I paroled to a friend's house in San Jose because I didn't want to parole to the same town I left, because after I'd been sent to prison, that same sergeant, by the way, that had interviewed me, he had said, we're waiting for him.
Oh shit. Okay.
They didn't think that I should have gotten leniency. So I did not want to go back to the town I came from. So I paroled to my friend's house in San Jose. And then eventually, fortunate enough to have family help me get a relatively cheap apartment. And I started going back. I went back to junior college, and then while I was on parole, and I got accepted into UCLA, UC Berkeley, all these other schools, because I had been doing college while I was in prison. So I applied to all those colleges during my last year in prison. I didn't tell them I was in prison, but I applied to all of them. And then I got into all of them when I came home. So I started at UC Berkeley about 6 months after coming home from prison. I majored in anthropology, specific in archaeology. So I started digging up dead people for fun. And then I graduated in December of 2013. I'm cramping a lot of things together, but I started doing 12-step when I came home.
Okay.
I met some people I used to use with before I'd gone to prison, and they were now sober. And so one of those people introduced me to a woman who she knew from the program. And then neither of us wanted to meet each other because I was interested in doing that post-prison dating thing. And she was done dating parolees. So neither of us wanted to meet each other. So this friend of mine forced us into the same room at the same time at the same meeting. And then the rest is history. She and I are now married. So I did meet my future wife, who was also in recovery, within 2 months of coming home from prison.
So obviously you got divorced from the first one while you were in there?
Yeah, that happened sometime after I'd gone to prison the second time, 2007 or 2008, something like that.
Okay.
No, I'm not married to two people.
I know, but I wanted to include that because I knew that part. But I wanted to finish her storyline. So how did you get into UC Berkeley and UCLA? Was it transcripts from high school or from when you'd gone to junior college? That was a long time.
Some of the junior college and the college I did while I was in prison.
Oh, all right. Oh, okay. Okay. So you were
So I had
going when
enough
you
for
went there.
I had enough for transfer credits after doing the college in prison.
Okay.
I just had to do one class at the junior college when I came home. I had to
Okay.
take one class with a physical lab
Okay.
before making the transfer, but I did that in that spring quarter right after coming home from prison.
Okay. And then anthropology, huh? But now you are, so after you graduated, then how do you get into your current work?
Oh, because I'm a felon. And after I graduated, nobody wanted to hire me.
Right. This is the important
Nobody,
part.
nobody, nobody wanted to hire me, even though I graduated with a 4.0, and even though it wasn't going well. And when I was in the county jail, a local chapter of the IBW, that's the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, it's an electricians union. They came into the county jail and gave a presentation about union apprenticeship, 5 years it takes to get trained, the requirements for getting in, how much money you make, what the benefits are like, all the benefits of union membership. And they said something that just I remembered for a really long time. And they said, we don't care what your past is so long as it stays there. And so after having come home from prison and after having gotten off parole and after having graduated from college and I was having a hard time finding work, I remembered that whole thing of like, we don't care about your past. Whereas here I was having to explain myself every time, everywhere I went, as if it was something I had done recently. So I just set my eyes on, you know what? I want to go somewhere where I don't have to explain myself anymore.
Yeah.
And so I found a job with a non-union electrical contractor and started working there as I applied to all the local unions and eventually got into an apprenticeship program and a 5-year apprenticeship program. And that IBW, they fulfilled their promise to me. They didn't care where I came from, gave me 5 years of training. They set me up for a great career. I make a great wage. I have great benefits. I cover so much of the stuff in terms of benefits for my wife and I. They don't care about my past. And the only thing that they care about is, the quality of my work, my consistency, the attitude I bring to the job, that sort of thing. Everything that you should care for in someone you work with. And so, yeah, I try to share that message with other people and help them understand that trade union is a way to go. Like, especially if you have a past like this, especially if you want to go a place where if we come from rough places, right? And there's something, it's going to sound weird to people, but there's something about working in the trades that kind of reminds me of the better parts of prison.
Totally.
Yeah. What I mean by the better parts of prison is like, just kind of like the calling it like it is, like joshing each other, having a good time, talking trash, like not walking on eggshells all the time because someone might get their feelings hurt and stuff like that. There's just something that's kind of fun about working in the trades that just doesn't, I don't know. I love it. I love working in the trades. And I love the fact that I make a great wage in a very, very expensive Bay Area. I love the fact that the folks take care of each other in ways I don't see with other employers. I love the freedom I have in the sense that like I can take off for a month vacation, 2-month vacation. I can do what I want and I will have work when I get back because unionism works a little bit different than when you work for a contractor that doesn't have a union bargaining agreement and whatnot. And so there's a lot of freedom in working in the union too, which is, of course, as someone who's been to prison, I like freedom just a little bit, So yeah, I spread that message a lot on TikTok and social media and other places and try to get other people in because I think, I think unionism is making a comeback in America and it is a way that we build the middle class, but this isn't a political show. So we can leave it at that. But I do want to just make sure people understand that folks with our backgrounds, there's great opportunity in taking up a union apprenticeship, especially when you consider the fact that you get the equivalent of like a 5-year degree without having any debt when you're done with it and being able to buy a home when you're not even done with it because you get paid the entire time you're going to school and you end it without debt, which is, there's not many places you can get that.
No, it's amazing. And that's why that's one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on so that you could say what you just said. And is that available just in California or is that how it works nationwide? I mean, are there unions in every state that you could get dialed in with a background? Okay.
Yeah, you're going to have to talk to the different unions, find out I can't speak for every union and every trade and every local. I can only speak for the ones here in the Bay Area that I'm more familiar with, but I don't see why you wouldn't have similar experiences in other parts of the country. Yeah. There's a joke sometimes that like, in order to get in, you have to have a felony, a divorce, and a DUI. I mean, That's just the joke. Yeah. So I don't know if that's actually true. Yeah. In the sense of like every union is that amenable to a background, but I can say these are the trades. And if we didn't allow people with backgrounds in, we'd have a hard time managing some of our work. Let's put it that way.
It's
So
like
come
that
on
here
over.
too, in Southern California, in San Diego.
Yeah,
I
come
know
on
that.
over.
This is a random question, but so my husband got his journeyman card at the AGC. Is that, and I think that that's the school that he went to, and now he works for ABC, which is like a different school. Sound familiar to you or no?
He's not union.
No, no,
I
no,
don't
no,
think that.
no.
So yeah, I'm not familiar with any of
Oh,
those.
okay,
In the sense that I think I've heard ABC is a non-union
it
kind of
is.
training program, but we do our own training.
Oh,
So
okay, okay.
I get this question a lot on TikTok. Like, if I just went to electrical school, can I come join? No, you come join, you'll come to our electrical school.
Right. Okay.
We have our own apprenticeship. We train people in the way that we want them to do the work. So
Yeah.
that sounds like something. Yeah, that sounds like the non-union side
Yeah,
of the
it
training.
is. ABC is a non-union. They do like the HVAC, electrical, and he's writing the carpentry program actually for San Diego because they didn't have one. But yeah, similar. So
You should bring him over to the union side.
we've talked about it. I mean, obviously he's heard the pitches, at different job sites and everything. So what does your recovery look like today? Like, what does that side of your life look like?
It's basically Buddhism.
Okay.
That's essentially what it is. So I guess I should say that, like, I did do 12-step when I came home. I continued to do 12-step when I came home. I still have a relationship with my sponsor. I'm not going to end a relationship just because I started to transition away from 12-step. But, part of the thing I was doing while I was in prison was like I was doing kind of the Buddhism over there. But because of some of the God heavy language that I found in 12-step, I didn't talk a ton about Buddhism like at a 12-step meeting, right? I didn't talk about, some of it was just, I don't want to rub people the wrong way. If I go like, I don't actually believe in God, I don't need to hear what you think about that, right? And so there's a certain element of like, I was compartmentalizing just a bit. Does that make sense? I kind of had my spiritual practice that I was doing over here, and I had my recovery and my 12-step. And so there was like some translating and compartmentalizing that was happening. I would translate 12-step language into Buddhist language in a way. And then they were kind of in separate places while I was in prison. And then when I came home, that compartmentalization became even a little bit stronger because, believe it or not, the meetings in prison are far more amenable. The folks in meetings in prison are far more amenable to saying, yeah, I don't believe in God at meeting level than they are when you come home to the streets. There's always somebody who's got something to say. So there's a little bit more compartmentalization, but it was fine. And then someone wrote a book that basically designed a recovery program that was Buddhist and mindfulness based. And so I started doing that. And I started a meeting, my wife and I started a meeting on Sunday nights that is this mindfulness and Buddhist space that used that program of recovery. And that was Refuge Recovery at the time. It is now a Recovery Dharma. And there was a whole thing that happened that we don't need to get into, and why one kind of fell apart and there's a split. Let's put it this way. Let's just think of it this way. It's kind of like the programs, we know 12-step programs split off for various reasons.
Right.
There was a split in the Refuge Recovery program, and I went the direction of Recovery Dharma. Okay. But the group that we started on Sunday night remains the same. And I slowly, in the beginning, I was doing 12-step and kind of the Buddhist recovery. And then as I took on service positions, as I became involved in kind of establishing the Buddhist-based recovery, the Refuge Recovery, and then the Recovery Dharma, it's just where I put all my energy. Right? I was putting all my energy there because I wasn't having to translate or compartmentalize anymore. I was being able to go to a meeting with other people with addictive behaviors and substance issues and things like that, and talk in Buddhist terms and talk without God terms and practice meditation. It was all happening in the same space. And so for me, it was just like kind of the natural movement. And in the beginning, I even had my own worries. I'm like, we've all heard the stories about people leaving a meeting and they relapse. And I realized I wasn't really leaving meetings. I wasn't even leaving the recovery community. I was just finding a place and really helping build a place that was more in alignment with the way I did my recovery. And so that's what I still do. We have Sunday nights. I only go to one meeting a week essentially, but I also go to other Buddhist stuff throughout the week because that feeds me. And so I'm a part of a community called the Boundless Freedom Project, which is a nonprofit organization that brings both Buddhist services and secular mindfulness teachings into prisons in California. And it's the descendant of the original Buddhist group I sat with when I was at Folsom State Prison. So I'm part of that group. And so I meet with them. And we have an online Sangha. I'm leading like a workshop with them for them, and essentially also incidentally with the first teacher I sat with when I was in Folsom State Prison. We're teaching a workshop together like next weekend. So I'm really involved in that community. Yeah, super full circle stuff. It's awesome. And that's part of my recovery too, because it's my spiritual path. And for me, like Buddhism, as I've talked about in terms of craving and whatnot, lends itself to recovery so well. I think one of the bigger differences with the Buddhist-based recovery and the recovery Dharma in general relative to 12-step stuff is that we don't hyper focus on a particular addiction, right? So you can come to a recovery Dharma meeting if you are a gambling addict, if you're a sex addict, if you're a food addict, if you are a heroin addict, an alcoholic. We've had people who are addicted to vindictive thinking and planning out and plotting like how to harm people. And that was the thing that bothered them. So it's a all addiction welcome sort of group. And I think what's useful about that for folks who start to get into long-term recovery is that it's useful for people who are still dealing with damage control, right? Of like not using heroin, not using alcohol, not using whatever. But it's also remains useful for people who have been sober 15 years or 18 years. And now I realize that I'm addicted to video games, or I'm addicted to my cell phone, or I'm addicted to, it's like the same process works with all of them. And that's not a separate meeting. You don't need to go to the Al-Anon group, or you don't need to go to the other group because you're doing something that's operates in a similar way as your original addiction. We can work on it in the same space. And so I like that because it, in a way, addresses the 6, 7-step stuff.
Yeah. I love that because those things start to come up over time. I have almost 9 years and there's a lot of stuff still, like patterns, addiction, like you mentioned the phone, like I'm super addicted to the phone and social media. And, I'm not struggling with not shooting heroin anymore, but there's still, patterns of addiction that cause, like you said, suffering, in various forms. So if somebody wanted to find a Buddhist meeting, Dharma recovery, or where would you recommend starting? Is there a book? Is there something online?
There is a book called Recovery Dharma, and that's DHARMA. You can also go to recoverydharma.org, and you can find meetings there, and there's meeting listings and whatnot. If you get the Recovery Dharma book, incidentally, we just came out with a second edition. So I actually helped write the basic text when Recovery Dharma started in 2019, but because of the nature of the split, it was kind of put together very fast. And so we wrote it, kind of donated it, right? So you don't have to buy it. You can get it for free if you want to download it as PDF and stuff. But if you want a hard copy, obviously you have to buy it. But we kind of wrote it with like this intent to rewrite it, or this intent to have a second edition, because it was written so fast. So we did have a second edition come out over the summer.
Oh, cool.
And it followed the similar trajectory as like the big book in AA, whereas the first book in AA, remember, was just basically the teachings, right?
Oh, I didn't even know that, actually. I didn't know there was an original one.
And then later on, they started including personal stories. So the second edition of the Recovery Dharma book, also we included personal stories, and I was fortunate enough to have mine included in there as well. So that was pretty cool. So find the Recovery Dharma book, and then you can obviously go to the website and find our meetings there. There's other places if you're just interested in this kind of quasi-meditative mindfulness Buddhist related recovery. If it's just something that speaks to you, and I suggest looking up the Buddhist Recovery Network as well as another resource, because it might not be a Recovery Dharma meeting, but there might be meditation groups for people in recovery, and you would be able to find stuff like that there too.
Okay. Oh, that's so cool. Okay. And then where can people find you? Because there's way more information along these lines if you guys are interested. Where can everybody connect with you?
Hahn Scratch, wherever it is.
Okay.
TikTok.
Which is
Twitter.
HAHN Scratch.
Right. Yeah. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Threads. I don't know, all of the places.
All the things.
Except not Snapchat.
Threads,
Snapchat. I don't do Snapchat.
Threads. No, I don't do Snapchat either.
Yeah.
Threads, I don't know. I started and I'm like, I can't, there's so many social media platforms. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's hard to keep up with all of them,
I miss the old Twitter though.
Yeah. No, that's a very weird thing. But well, I cannot thank you enough for your time. I knew that this would be an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for following up with me and coming on and, being so generous with your time. I'm glad we got to speak for so long. I hope that that's okay.
It's going to be a long episode.
It's going to be a long episode. Well, I'll break it down in 2. I know exactly where I'm going to split it. I'm going to split it right when you open the safe.
Okay. Do it.
That's going to be my part 1. And then we'll go into part 2 because there's a lot of really good information here. So I just thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, I just really appreciate it. Is there any last thing that you would want to leave anybody with? No? Okay. All right. I love the idea of craving equals suffering. I think that that's something that will resonate with everybody, and then the path out of that, whether it's 12-step, whether it's what you suggested, that's like the human condition, right? Which is what they say in Buddhism. The human condition is suffering. And then how do we handle that?
we can do another one of these one day if you want, and we'll just talk about that stuff if that's what. And then we
I
don't
would
have
love to do
then
that.
it doesn't have to have the long story part to begin.
The whole story. Yeah, we can just do. I would actually really like to do that, and I know that my audience would really like to listen to that too. We can delve a little bit more into that. What does your daily meditation practice look like? And then we're done.
It depends. When I'm going to work, it's in the car in the morning, quietly.
Okay.
And then on weekends, it's either in my group or in a bedroom somewhere.
Okay.
I mean, if you want specifics about what types of meditation objects I'm picking up, that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, mindfulness of breath, mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling tones, mindfulness of mind. Practicing loving kindness, cultivating loving kindness and compassion, cultivating generosity and appreciative joy, cultivating equanimity. I mean, I'm just throwing it all out there for you. You want to see what's in the basket.
Okay.
But yeah,
we have to do another one.
Yeah,
we'll do another one.
It's a totally different conversation.
Yeah. But I would love that. I would love to do an episode where we do like the more specifics, because this does really resonate with me, all of it. You know, like you said that when you first came across it, it felt truthful. It does to me too all the year, you know, because you come across Buddhist things on either, even if it's like social media or like I was joking about the movie, but I really did kind of take it in. And I think I read a little bit about it, and it has always spoken to me as well, you know? So I would love to do an episode about it.
All right, we'll do it.
So, okay. Well, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. I was glad to be here. I'm glad to be here.